Hi guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to No Limits, a Rapp podcast. So what have you been doing this week, Mike?
Man, I've been getting ready for a bathroom remodel.
Boom.
Yeah, it's our first home improvement project, so man, we've been running around to the stores picking out tile and all that business.
Well, that's exciting. Grown-up things.
Right? I know. Home ownership, man.
I am not looking forward to that.
You rent your place, right?
I rent my place, but we're looking to buy when we move down to DC, so
nice.
we'll be looking maybe be a future homeowner.
Nice. It's exciting. It's fun.
It is.
The market's just so crazy down here, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah. So. Anything new with you?
I just bought my son his first golf set.
There we go.
Pretty excited about that.
Get him started.
Friends of the pod will know that I'm been into golf this summer. Got out 3 times last week, so that was good.
There you go.
Not getting much work done.
To get into it today, we have to welcome our newest patron, and she is
welcome.
Our first special operator, Sherry.
Boom, baby.
Sherry F. We are happy to have you, Sherry. Thanks for supporting the show. It's thanks to you and all our other patrons we are able to commit to 4 episodes a month, making this pretty much a weekly podcast. And so thanks for your patronage. You can find Sherry on Twitter at SherryFoster14. And we are getting close to covering our podcast operating costs, which means in the next couple of months, we will be setting up our first donation to the Prostate Cancer Foundation as a way to give back for all the work that they do with veterans.
Yes, super excited about that.
So thanks to our patrons, we are very close to being able to put together our first donation.
Yeah, and to all our listeners, you too can join this elite group and become a patron of our show, just like Sherry F., Peggy G., Catherine C., Ray M., and Jeff P., by clicking that little orange button, support us on Patreon button on our website at mitrappod.com.
All right. So what are we covering in today's episode?
Right, so we just finished our 2-part podcast going in detail in a summary of the book, and today we're going to be doing our deep dive in sort of the themes of what we gathered, and we're going to talk about some of our favorite characters, some of the things we liked, some of the things we didn't like, and finish up with our zero-sum game. So, what was your initial reaction about the book, Mike?
Well, Chris, I guess you could say my review of the book is best summed up in the form of a limerick.
Oh, a limerick, huh?
Did I tell you about this? I started posting on Goodreads all of my reviews in a double limerick format.
I remember when we were first starting the podcast, you pitched some segments to me, and you're like, I think we should do reviews in a limerick. And I was like, I'm not that poetic, so I'm seeing you're really 4 months in, you're bringing it back.
Well, initially, actually, I mentioned haiku to you, and you told me
haiku.
You're not a fan of the haiku. And I don't know, it brings a little rhyme into the picture. So I went with limericks, and kind of just came to me for Lethal Agent, so I ran with it.
Well, let's hear it.
All right. Well, here's what I posted on Goodreads for Lethal Agent. Deep in the Mexican jungle, Rapp stirs up quite the rumble. A book for our time, Rapp peddles a dime. A race for the border, they tumble. Fast-paced, action-packed. Rapp's maneuvers got me jacked. A sick kill with a crossbow, a threat we all know. With Mills, the Rapp saga's intact.
Boom. That was sick.
There it is.
You were able to encapsulate a couple of my favorite things from this novel in that haiku we didn't even talk about this.
No.
The crossbow scene, I think, is one of the best. Like, I've never seen Mitch Rapp kill with a crossbow, and it was amazing.
I think we're going to be on the same page with our winners and losers at the end of this episode here.
Very much so.
Yeah, so
that was good haiku. Limerick.
You like that? Well, I got one for total power. There will be more limericks in the future, Chris.
I think a new segment is brewing. So
there will be more limericks. I think we need a meme, too.
Probably. All right, so let's kick off this with just first starting off with the title of the book, right? You have Lethal Agent, and as with most novels, the Lethal Agent sort of is always a double-edged sword, 2 meanings. And in this, I think we have both the lethal agent that is Mitch Rapp and, his endeavors. And then you also have the lethal agent that is this virus, that is pretty scary. And, we should mention that this obviously came out before the current times and is modeled off of the previous pandemic, SARS. And so, what did you think of the title, Mike?
Great title. Nailed it. Perfect meaning, both cases. I mean, Rapp's always a lethal agent, but this time he's going to get infected with a lethal agent. He can't do anything about it. And I guess at the same time, we have Halabi is this lethal agent because he's modernized. He's really looking at America and our vulnerabilities in a different, more creative way. And he's also taking ISIS to a more professional, Western-trained, Western-educated caliber. And so he's also going to be a lethal agent. But there's one more lethal agent, though, who's going to come up a lot in this podcast, who's kind of working against America from the inside, perhaps not even knowing the damage she's causing, but the politicians like Christine Barnett. So I don't know. I think Lethal Agent nails it in more than just those two ways. We get a good 3 or 4 different sub-meanings to that title.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, just initially, I really enjoyed this book. I think, and after listening to a couple of the podcasts that were interviewing Kyle about around the time this book came out and hearing some of the things that he said, this book really brings me back to beginning stages of events. And it's honestly kind of cool that we did it now, right after reading Transfer Power and The Third Option, because this because Kyle had sort of taken his own little, path, bringing Mitch Rapp into new places. And in this book, we bring back that whole idea of the politicians being the secondary villain, right? And we have a very, I don't know, I felt like this book was very old school Vince. That's how it felt.
No, I agree. And Kyle has said that that's what he was going for after taking some liberties with Red War, kind of going a different direction.
I love Red War too.
Like, I loved it.
I'm not saying that I wanted, I was craving this, but I loved it.
I agree with you, but there was a subsection of fans who did think he kind of went away from Vince's style, and he did, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think Mitch was just being Mitch. I thought it was fine, and I thought the times called for it, right? With Russia, how he handled the political nature of Russia made sense in that book. But you're right, he came back to a formula here. For example, look at the author's note in the beginning, how he's obscuring the anthrax production and the border crossings. That's very Transfer Power-like. And then even the very ending, having Coleman go out and take the bad guy in an epilogue, or I guess that was the last chapter, but that was very early Vince, his way of writing, that the bad guy is taken out in this one-on-one kind of battle in the last chapter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so,
no, definitely.
I agree. I think Kyle got a lot right in this book besides just the virus and predicting the global pandemic. Like a lot of people will look at that and say, wow, that's the reason this book is so adept for our times. I think there's more to it, though. I think what he really nailed was the current political climate at large, and not just in response to this event.
Yeah. I think let's get into some of the themes, and one of the first things that I really picked out was the idea of really grasping the state of the USA and our current political climate and entwining it into a book and making it, so approachable and understandable in this work of fiction. I don't know, just not only the fact of the coronavirus, but just bringing in these political characters and how our nation is run, and really like fully encapsulating in this book, which I feel like in the past maybe that hasn't been. I guess his interactions with Russia were obviously sort of mimicking what's going on in Russia now, but everything else in these books really hasn't been. It was sort of you had our universe and then the Mitch Rapp universe, but this was really overlapping the two.
Yeah, it was. I mean, even if you think about Al-Qaeda and all the Middle East terrorism cells, obviously it was, it's kind of the same story, right? Like, you're going to write it, they have motivations, and you describe their motivations as if they existed in the real world. But to turn that on its head and describe the motivations of American politicians and our political system that appropriately, we get an overview of what America's like at the time. And so here's a quote from the second chapter of the book. America is as weak as it has been in 150 years. Its people are consumed with hatred for each other. They see themselves as having been cheated by the rest of the world, stolen from, taken advantage of. The 24-hour news cycle continues to reinforce these attitudes, as do the Russians' internet propaganda efforts. And the upcoming presidential election is amplifying those divisions to the point that the country is being torn apart. Chris, that last line, and the upcoming presidential election is amplifying those divisions to the point that the country is being torn apart.
It's
Holy
very
crap.
prescient for right now. Yeah.
He described not only 2016's election, but also the 2020 campaign primary season and run up to the election. That's it.
No, it's some great writing and really trying to bring in. I liked the overlap between the Rapp verse, because like a lot of these things, yes, they could happen, but we often sort of put it away as, oh, this is fiction. But in this book, I really felt like it was reality. You know, like I was reading something that could happen, and then like the fact that this is about a virus that. And then we actually were in a time of a virus. I don't know. We're going to get into that more later, but this book just felt, I don't know, very real.
It also felt real because of this dialogue between Mitch and Claudia. And at first I read it as it's just Rapp wanted to get out earlier. Now he met somebody and she's trying to convince him to get out and lay low and spend their life together. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cliche.
Everyone wants to get Mitch out.
They want to get Mitch out. But the words, the words in the dialogue so closely relate that not just to the same old, I want to get out and lead a happy life. It's more related to the political climate's changing and your options. If you were a special operator or you were in the military, your options are limited. I mean, I think he said she's trying to argue with him and she says, what'll happen when the real shit hits the fan? What are they going to what is America going to do if they're faced with something that can't be fixed by a Facebook petition? And Mitch says that actually. And then Claudia says, your America is changing. She's not just saying, let's get out because I want a nice life. She's saying, America is going to turn on you, their hero. Because of everything you did to save them, they're not going to give a crap in today's changing world. You're just going to be labeled an enemy by some new administration that hated the previous administration. And so it's not just the same old story. She's really adding something new to this argument based on what's going on in the political climate. Genius.
Right. Yeah, and I like this quote that Halabi actually brings in sort of to state how, it's his rationale in terms of like why he hates America and what he views America is. And he states that Americans are people of extremes, prone to fits of rage and self-destructiveness, but also in possession of an inner strength that no one in history has been able to overcome. Like that is some deep shit right there.
But that's, again, it's not just a throwaway of I hate Americans because I'm a radicalized, fundamentalist. It's again, I'm going to use that as their vulnerability because I see it. It's not just going to motivate me towards hate. It's going to motivate me to bring ISIS into its next stage. I'm going to pick that apart and play on it and use these politicians and all this political climate and the media, and I'm going to manipulate it. But at the same time, he knows it's why America has lasted and why no caliphate in the modern age has been able to take it down. He's saying it's because we need to learn from them about their strengths. They still have this inner strength and break that down from the inside.
I think a lot of, sort of this theme of really overlapping the current political stage can be summed up with the character of
Christine Barnett,
and how she embodies everything that's wrong with politics. And again, listening to Kyle's interview with the crew review guys, he stated that he wrote the character purposefully he purposely didn't say political party she was a part of. So if we look back in history, in the books, we know that President Alexander actually was a Democrat. So because she's the opposing party, she would be a Republican. If obviously Kyle has taken liberties to change things, and who knows what he wanted, but he said he purposely wrote this book so that way neither of them had a political party. And he wrote it that this character had both elements of Trump and Hillary, so that way when a person was reading this book and they could see whoever they wanted to see, they could see in this character. And that was great, because obviously when I was reading this, I saw elements of Trump, I saw elements of Hillary. I just thought, what a great character development to be able to do that, to put that, to allow the reader to, based on their hatred or prejudice or whatever, they could sort of associate this character with someone. Like that's such great character development, I think.
That's what literature should do. And Kyle's showing he's a master. It shouldn't really reinforce your biases, right? And it shouldn't be a straight analogy,
right?
A one-to-one of the real world. It's like Tolkien, right? He always said, I never want the Lord of the Rings and the universe to be read as pure analogy. And he kind of wanted to push C.S. Lewis to do this better, thinking like, oh, Narnia was just related to, the spiritual world in heaven. And then, Aslan the Lion is the redemptive figure of Christ and God. And Tolkien pushed that literature and art should not be analogous, but it should highlight the real world and should
transcend that.
Transcend it, exactly. Rise above it, but at the same time, understand it, come up with themes and characters and interactions that help you understand the real world, but without being a one-to-one, very simple Democrat, good or bad, right? Republican, good, bad. And so I think Christine Barnett does that. You read it and you could pick different things and say, oh, that sounds like a problem that the left is having in recent decades, or oh, that's an issue that's on the right now in a Trump administration. But it's never that one-to-one analogy where you very quickly jump to a conclusion and condemn one side because of it. It's not very jingoistic the way he writes his character.
Yeah. I don't know. Like some of the things that she does is just,
it's a dirt.
Crazy, man.
I mean, look at this. She goes, and this is a quote, American people don't give a crap about politics at all. What they want is a show and fireworks. Children die while Irene Kennedy covers her ass and Mitch Rapp chases his tail. This is a gift, Kevin. Use it. And she's talking about a terror threat, an attack on the homeland, especially a bioweapon. And she's saying, this is a gift. Let's use it to score political points. How much lower can you get?
The lows that she goes to use anything in political spin in this book is mind-blowing. Like, I thought, like House of Cards type stuff was shitty. But in this book, some of the things that she uses, it's like, there's no such thing as bad press, right? It's like...
Oh, yeah, we could turn... You say the same thing over and over, you can turn the people against Jesus Christ himself or something
exactly,
like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I really... I didn't like the character, but I enjoyed the existence of this character. I thought that Kyle did a great job developing this character and putting her in the book. We're probably going to get to this at the end, but I thought she had... her downfall wasn't large enough. That was the one problem I had with it, but...
Okay. I don't know. I think I like the way that he found a way for Rapp to wrap up her storyline and take away her influence without him just going guns blazing, hunting her down. I thought that was a real creative little slip at the end to have him sneak into her apartment and or her house, toss her the pills. I thought it was a creative way to write her story.
I just felt that she needed to.
She deserved worse.
Deserved worse. She didn't. She deserved more than having going. That was the easy way out.
Well, Rapp says that he goes, "I'm offering you the easy way out. You'd be a fool not to take it."
She didn't deserve his offer.
She didn't deserve the offer. Okay.
That's how I felt, at least. I don't know.
Okay, I'll give you that. There's another quote here that makes you think this character and this storyline was perfect for either the 2016 or 2020 election. It just fits perfectly when she's describing to her chief of staff, quote, what they want, the American people, what they thirst for is to hurt the people they hate. They don't want a politician droning on about unemployment. They want a general. They want to blindly follow someone who can provide them with an enemy to lead them to victory against that enemy. Someone who can give their lives purpose. How many people in our last couple of elections, their message was to rally a certain base, not in a good way that glorifies the country, but rally that base in a way that creates an enemy for them to unite against. And that enemy, sadly, are fellow Americans.
I mean, that's just politics in general, right?
It is.
Or it's at least, 2020 politics.
It's amplified, now, in recent times. But again, another way her character just exemplifies the current climate we're in.
Yeah. Related to that topic is not only the political climate, but Kyle's ability to weave in a lot of the real world into this fictional world. We have the war in Yemen, which, before reading this book, I'm gonna, say I'm ignorant here, and I really didn't understand it that much. But after reading it, I'd done some deep diving, and it's kind of crazy what's going on over there, as well as like our strained relations with other countries such as Mexico and Saudi Arabia. We talked about this before, but how divided America is, not only because of politics, but also the trust in science, the trust in our health professionals.
He weaves the two of those, though. The real world problems, talking about the war in Yemen, is yet another factor, and the humanitarian crisis in the virus being so problematic there.
Exactly.
Right? And so how I think even when who's the doctor on the ground with the NGO? Victoria Schaefer, is that her name? Yeah. And she's on the phone with one of her bosses, and she's saying we need supplies. And one of his arguments is, it's a war-torn, poor country. We're limited. He's kind of like defeatist. And I think that happens in the real world, right? We have all these aims and agendas, and then real world problems and crises make it too hard to get the resources where they're needed most and to develop infrastructure.
Right. You're in this shit country that has, X problems, X, Y, and Z. Contain the virus and get out of there.
Get out of there. That's it.
We can't, do the right thing. And I think that's something that just happens in general. And it's kind of scary to think that, maybe viruses like this or outbreaks like that could happen in these small little villages. And because they're, if Halabi never goes there and captures somebody, probably that's exactly what happens. They're able to contain it. Everyone there dies probably, and because they're not moving around. So, and
it's sadly just another humanitarian crisis that the UN will put a statement about and say, we mourn the loss of so and so, and then move on.
Yeah. So I don't know. Just bringing that into here is another element of sort of bringing the reality into the fiction.
That same thing happens with the drug cartels in Mexico.
Yes. What's crazy? Yesterday, the news broke that they found this huge, massive underground tunnel.
Don't tell me it's near a shopping mall.
It was not near a shopping mall, but it was it was one of the most super sophisticated tunnels that they had seen. It was almost a kilometer long. Jeez. It had plumbing, electricity, and the only reason they found it is because of the sinkhole.
Oh, a sinkhole opened into it?
Yeah, because they had a lot of rain, and this was in Arizona. And I was listening to the BBC World Service, and I heard that come across, and it reminded me of the only reason they found it is because NASA
and the satellites.
Yeah, and the satellites saw this tunnel, and apparently it was one of the most sophisticated tunnels they had ever seen. And the month before, they had found another one, and so it had train tracks where they were going to be able to put on a cart a motorized thing to push in not only drugs but people.
That's unreal. Yeah, we think so much about the border and the drug issue coming in, but human trafficking, man, is such a and I guess this book touches on that with the actual infected victims being humans who pay a coyote to find a route and take them across the border. Kyle is touching on some real deep and really pressing issues in our current time.
Yeah, if you guys, you or the listeners ever want to really understand the coyote experience, I highly recommend. There's this one episode of This American Life. You can just Google it, look it up, and it's a reporter that he puts himself through going through it, and essentially there's this company. It's kind of weird, but have you ever done a hemlock or some sort of team building exercise?
Where a ropes course and the zip line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in Mexico, they offer for well-to-do companies in Mexico City the experience to cross the border. as like a team building experience.
What?
So this reporter for This American Life went and did it, and like they put you fully through the experience. They put you in a bag. They set off gunfire. Like they actually like release you, and like they put off dogs, and it's like the craziest thing ever.
Holy
like this
moly.
podcast was, and it like he podcasts and he documents the entire time. It was a really intense podcast.
Wow, I believe
highly recommend it just to like hear his experience. And it's all it's kind of crazy that they put it on for these rich people when actually people are doing it to save their lives.
Yeah,
that's like another aspect of the business, I guess. That
I forget what podcast it was. I don't think it was NPR, but it was a reputable like news source, and they were basically interviewing social workers at the time of the whole Trump's putting kids in cages on the border kind of headlines. And the social worker was begging and pleading the media not to push that storyline because she was saying, look, we interview these families and we have a parent tell us about their kid that they're trying to cross the border with, and we have them in a detainment facility, and they word for word, without knowing any English, in English, say the exact same lines. And she's like, that just shows they've been trained by professional human traffickers to repeat these lines as a way to get the kid with you across the border. And so the social worker is like the whole, and it's terrible if we're really separating true and honest families, right? But the social worker is saying it's harder than you think, because sometimes when they say this is my kid, they've trained the parent or they've trained the kid to not say anything as a way to sneak in. And oftentimes they're being resold, right? They're being trafficked by people. And so the social worker's like, it's really deeper than just we're putting them in detainment facilities and ripping kids out of parents' arms. She's like, sometimes the people they're crossing with are their literal slave owners.
Yeah, not their parents.
Not their parents. And they're repeating these trained lines by these professional human traffickers saying, you must say this when you get across. And it's not really a family at all. But
that whole situation
it's terrible.
Is crazy.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's a new situation, though, to see Rapp up against, and it doesn't go that deep, right? But still, the fact that Rapp is working on the U.S. border, that's brand new. I like it.
Yeah, it's probably like the least, this, I don't know, the third plot of the story that, while it was interesting to see Rapp in this new environment of, one, although I think I brought this up to you before, but, Rapp is fluent in French. French is a Romance language. So is Spanish. I feel like he should be better at Spanish than he actually portrays in the book. But anyways, that's a minor digression. But it's interesting to see him struggling. He doesn't know the language.
So while we're on Rapp in unknown territory, that's another way Claudia is trying to convince him to step back at this point.
Yes.
Kind of saying this is too high risk. This is something new, something unseen. There's probably a new group of people out there who should handle this. And there's this funny quote about Rapp's tombstone. Did you catch this one?
I did. I liked it.
Rapp is he's processing everything Claudia is trying to tell him about getting out. And he says, while her assessment was hard to argue with, high risk, low return, that was a front runner for the engraving on his tombstone. Currently in third place behind, do you think they'll be able to stitch that up? And does anyone else hear ticking? I love that. I love that. That's excellent.
I won't have anywhere near as greatest quotes on my tombstone as Mitch Rapp will.
Overweight man, played video games, made pizza, and occasionally golfed. Let me change that. Overweight white male, played video games, occasionally golfed, made pizza.
Mine'll be golf too much, had too many kids, overweight white male.
Hey, at least both of ours might say reads a lot of books.
There we go.
Read a lot of books.
Mitch Rapp fan. Mitch Rapp's number one fan. We'll both be Mitch Rapp's number one fan.
Badgered Kyle Mills until he agreed to come on the show.
Let me just interview with these guys so he gets off my ass,
So they stop bothering us on Twitter.
Who are these guys?
Oh, right. Well, that was what David asked us when we first reached out. Like, hey, we're thinking about a Mitch Rapp podcast. He's like, oh, what's your Twitter handle? You've probably been talking and posting about him for years. Nope, never had a Twitter.
No, honestly, we just got into it. We just really like the books.
Oh, we've never seen you on social media discussing any books? Nope.
Wait, you've never been a Mitrap ambassador before?
What's a
What's
Mitrap
that?
ambassador? How do I sign up?
Can I be one? I didn't know about this.
Can I have some? If I've been reading these books since I was 15 and didn't know there was an ambassador program.
Yeah, if I'd have known I could have got an advanced reading copy of all these books for
Yeah.
free, I probably would have signed up really sooner.
I would have been reading Lethal Agent in like May or something.
You gotta cut that.
I'll cut some of that, but I'm leaving most of it.
Oh, man.
I mean, when Rapp's in these new experiences, everything he's been through and learned over his career is what allows him to excel. And right, that's when he's almost most comfortable, is when
Yes.
those X variables come into play. And I think he learned that from his mentor, who he had a love-hate relationship with, or maybe hate-hate, but
Good old Stan Hurley.
you can't say he didn't learn a lot from the guy. Yeah, and so Stan Hurley comes up in two of this book's greatest quotes. In the first one, he recalls Hurley saying, quote, "It's not how you play the game, it's whether or not your opponent ends up dismembered in the woods." And I mean, Rapp learns that, right? He's not sitting around waiting to figure out anything or get the whole intel. He's moving. He freaking kills that guy in the woods, and he dismembers him by turning his fibula into a lockpick. I think he
That was
learned.
awesome.
I think he learned a
was
lesson
awesome.
from Stan.
Yeah. No, I think Rapp is able to thrive in this new situation because of his previous experiences, and I really enjoyed being able to see him. We've seen him in the Middle East, we've seen him in Europe, even seen him in the U.S., but to put him in a new situation where he, again, doesn't know the territory, doesn't know the language, but he goes back to first principles and uses his knowledge from Hurley and gets the job done.
Yeah, he also relies on another piece, actually in all of these books, but we see it yet again, building a team.
Yes.
And trusting the people around you. Like, once somebody's on that team, they're there for a reason, and you got to listen to them. Like, he does that here. And Irene really is doing that back on the home front with Statham, right? The Army specialist on infectious diseases, right?
Yes.
He doesn't think twice when Statham is telling him, you can't blow up, or we can't blow up the truck with the infected terrorist. He's like, because then the virus will spread to animals, and the animals can carry it, and the blood will get out there. And we get this great quote when he really wants to just ignore it and do what he has to do. He relies on what Statham is saying as the expert. So he says, quote, "Questioning Statham's knowledge on diseases is like questioning Stan Hurley on Southeast Asian hookers." You just don't do it.
I out loud chuckled when I read that line.
That
was funny.
That might be one of Kyle's best, honestly. That's up there. That is up there.
Yeah, that quote is great, but he's able to adapt. He trusts his team, and we don't really see much of Irene in this novel. That's probably like the least amount of Irene I think we've seen in a novel in a long time. But she gets the job done. She has her little battles with Barnett in the White House and in Congress, whatever. But she builds them a team, and they develop a strategy that ultimately succeeds, which is important.
It's pretty cool that those two principles are the reason Rapp can succeed in these sorts of environments. And in Total Power Man, we're absolutely going to see that.
Yes,
that's all I'll say.
Our final theme of this book is probably the elephant in the room that we haven't really talked about, but the use of a coronavirus as a bioweapon, which is very important because we're in a pandemic right now, and not that it's anywhere nearly as bad as what YARS has the capability to be. We have Mike, you were so kindly to wrap up all the things we know about YARS. So YARS has a 30% survival rate. 30% of survivors are permanently disabled, and healthy adults are infected at the same rate that children and the elderly are. In a village of 75, 25 people died, so that's like, a 1/3 death rate. It's really, really intense. We have, just, they talk about services and, casual contact can infect people. and then the infection rate is over 50%. So it's very different than what we're seeing now. And I think, in the beginning of this global pandemic, I made the mistake of watching the movie Contagion. Have you seen that one, Mike?
No, I haven't. I've heard from a lot of people that I need to.
It's a good movie. Again, in that movie, the major difference between, COVID-19, YARS, and I forget what the name of the virus is in that movie is the death rate, obviously, and the fact that in both the book we just read and in the movie, way more people die, but everything else is, pretty much the same. The infectability and just the ease at which this virus can penetrate when we have these novel things. And I don't know, it's scary, like reading this book now. I wonder if I had read it because I had sort of taken a break from reading. I had finished all these books, and then I'd got this book for Christmas, but I hadn't read it yet. And then, coronavirus happened, we started this podcast, and then I read it, and I was like, holy shit, Kyle Mills is able to predict the future. But, I don't know. How did you feel about the use of, the fact that we're in a pandemic now, and he uses this as a weapon, and two, what did you like the idea of bringing a bioweapon into a Mitch Rapp novel?
I think it was the perfect enemy to bring up at this time. It's really something that could defeat Rapp, right? When you
Yes.
want to ask yourself, what could bring down Rapp? And look at everything he's been through in all of these books, and what kind of author would have the ability to write another character that we would just be as equally scared of Rapp facing? It's like, what are we going to be afraid of? He's Rapp. Yet Kyle found that thing, right? And in Total Power, again, he finds that thing. COVID-19 seems to have happened organically, right? It wasn't weaponized, at least as far as we know. And the conspiracy theorists might disagree with me, and there might be something to it, but Kyle kind of deals with how would it be weaponized? And so this character of Bertrand that we haven't talked about, it was really unique getting inside Halabi's thought process of what he was going to do with Bertrand. And Bertrand had studied pathogens. He examined and modeled their paths. He's done
He's like me.
Decades of contact tracing. Yeah, like all the scientists. You're always making computer models. You showed me that other one. I don't even know what I was looking at. But well, Chris, you're in science. So do you feel that Halabi's attack and the way he planned it was that much more dangerous having a specialist like Bertrand that he was pretty much torturing and getting information out of about how to design a pathogen, how to release it, where it should go, what city centers you should pick, because he had all this modeling and this data?
Oh, yeah, very, very much so. I think that, and again, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later in our lowlights, but the whole, anyone can produce anthrax if they really wanted to. It's like not that hard to do. With a couple of ingredients, and I think that's one of the reasons why Kyle mentioned that he sort of tried to obscure some things because of the ease of what anthrax is able to do. I mean, I think I could do it
with the right equipment. You're saying
with the right equipment. I mean,
but it's not that deadly. That's
I'm also
right?
a scientist. I know how to culture things. I know how to extract things. So, but again, that's the problem with anthrax is the lack of or its infectability.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the YARS thing, having that, being able to, that's sort of the scary thing about this, that these diseases potentially could be out there that are more deadly than COVID-19, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if someone is able to bring them to the United States and using someone who, like an epidemiologist who studies this kind of stuff, or, a virologist who understands epidemiology and where to put these people, how to infect the most amount of people, how to potentially allow for adaptation in the virus, because that's key, right? You need this virus to jump, and if you want to reach max infectability, you need it to be able to potentially jump to other things.
Other species, too.
Sure, or adapt to be able to adapt its infectability. So therefore, now it can
survive in different
surfaces.
Yeah, different surfaces and different temperatures even.
Have you ever played the game Plague Inc.?
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, it's a stupid game, and but literally that it teaches you about if you want to infect the world, you need to either be really infectious or you need to have multiple different means of infecting people. So, if it was able to mutate and rats can now spread it. I mean, that's how bubonic plague happened,
the Black
right?
Plague, yeah.
Yeah. Or if you go to being way more touch-based, where like COVID-19 doesn't seem to be very touch-based. It's very much aerosol or,
Mm-hmm.
So like, if COVID-19 was touch-based, then
through contact,
it would be way more infectable, right? So,
well, it just makes you wonder. I mean, an epidemiologist and this guy Bertrand can figure that out and maybe weaponize it intentionally, but nature's going to do that as well, right? Isn't that basically evolution and survival of the fittest? Aren't viruses going to do the same thing over, of course, hundreds of years, right? It's a much longer timetable, but are they not also adapting in that way naturally? Like, has COVID been a product of natural selection in terms of the virus itself getting smarter? Like the way the symptoms don't show up, right? For that 2-week period?
I mean, what's the best disease? Can you answer me? What's the best disease on the planet right now?
In terms of you would survive it?
The most successful... No. What is the most... In your opinion, what's the most successful disease?
I want to say it's something like this COVID, but I'm sure scientifically it's something that we've all just become immune to over years, and we all have it.
It's the common cold.
It's a common cold. Yeah, something we all have, yeah.
Yeah. So viruses don't care about killing. I mean, diseases actually don't... They don't want to kill people. They don't want to...
They just care about numbers, essentially, you're saying?
That's... Literally, this virus cares about propagating itself. That is its number one goal.
Just to stay alive.
Is to stay alive, propagate, adapt, live. The moment that's why Ebola it's bad, but like, that's why Ebola is never going to be such a bad problem because it's too deadly.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that's one of the reasons why COVID-19 is such a great, I shouldn't say that. In terms of
like scientifically, it's scientifically outstanding. Yeah.
It is a perfect disease.
Yeah.
It doesn't kill that many. Like, its death rate is not that high. Its infectability is really high.
Mm-hmm. And the symptoms being delayed is a key
And the
thing.
symptoms are delayed. A lot of asymptomatic people are getting it. So yeah, like it's quote unquote perfect.
Sure, I understand that argument. Yeah, I mean, take all that for what it's worth, and then add the layer of it's breaking out in a war-torn country that is already struggling. That might not have been a big deal, but you got to think about resources. Like when it happened in a Wuhan, China, in a main urbanized, dense area, becomes even that more scary. And then you add onto it, it's in a globalized world of air travel and all sorts of travel. And it's like, it becomes global instead of just a local issue. Like I'm sure you mentioned, a lot of these could have been and have been in the past. Globalization is changing that.
Well, that's exactly why Halabi wants to get them across the American border, make it seem like it comes out of America itself.
Yeah.
And even at the last minute, he's
upset,
just willing, and he's willing to let it go off in Mexico just so he can infect whatever.
But it bothers him. Like he doesn't want it to start in Mexico. He wants the world to blame the U.S. for starting it.
Yeah.
But again, that's not going to matter because if it got out, it would still reach hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of crazy how he doesn't even care because Bertrand even says like this. There's no way to like protect your people.
Yeah.
Like
you'll die too. Like
you will die too. Yeah. Or a certain amount of your people.
It will hit the Middle East.
And Halabi's okay with that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He thinks that by crippling the American government, the American economy, the caliphate can rise and it'll be primed to take. I guess that's his end game, right? Is to have the virus to be able to cripple America, so that way ISIS can come through and finally take over. But I don't know. I think just this plot, the use of the bioweapon, the use of a coronavirus or a SARS-like virus is really scary to think about because COVID-19 is, while a lot of people have died, I'm not trying to belittle that at all, right? It could be a lot worse if we were to look at YARS, something like YARS, and that is scary. The fact that if we're going to use that as a weapon.
Yeah, I just wonder, what if we were reading this book in like 2012 and COVID wasn't going to happen? You know, we wouldn't even know about the potential of it. Wasn't even thinking about it on our minds. I guess it was kind of like that, reading it when it first came out in 2019. And then just a short few months or weeks later, even hearing about Corona in China. But I just wonder, like, how long would we have sat with this book and been like, oh, that was a thrilling book? Would it have played on our psyche so much that it was a global pandemic? Or would it have just been yet another book and like, oh, it's kind of scary, you know? I hope that doesn't happen.
Like, well, you know, it's interesting. Like, Bush was the one who made the whole pandemic, like, readiness, whatever that we had. Well, I guess we ended up not having it. Anyways, but President Bush was, like, super scared of a pandemic because he read a book about the Spanish flu.
Oh, there you go.
And then did, like, this deep dive into, you know, pandemics, and therefore he wanted to have us ready for one.
Yeah. Or talking about a team, building a team, I bet he had advisors that was something that came up and should have been and was taken seriously.
Well, yeah, I mean, I sent you this thing back when COVID popped off. Last year, every year, like, a bunch of epidemiologists and virologists get together and have a conference and they do like sort of a war game scenario where they're given a scenario. Last year's was a novel coronavirus comes out of Brazil and it has X, Y, and Z. And what are you going to do? Like, what's your plan to contain, stop, mitigate, whatever? So yeah, like, people are thinking about this all the time.
Yeah, good. I hope we continue to and fund and provide the resources where necessary for this.
You know, I'm a biochemist, but it makes me feel like I wish I had gotten into virology or epidemiology. That stuff seems really interesting and I don't want to say fun, but just, you know, invigorating.
Sure. I'll call you Gabrielle Bertrand from now on.
Oh, please don't. I don't want to be a pussy like that.
That's the best line on the pod so far. 17 episodes in and we got it.
I don't want to be like him. I'd rather be like Victoria Schaefer going down with a fight, you know?
All right. Should we get into our winners and losers here? Zero-sum game?
Yeah. Let's
start with you. Who was your favorite character, major or minor, and why?
So, I liked Halabi as the villain, because we had sort of got to know him a little bit while he wasn't a major character in the previous book, or 2 books ago, right? I liked him as a villain. We mentioned this before, but I really liked the character. Like, I didn't like her, but I liked the idea of the character of Christine Barnett. And I liked Carlos Esparza, the frickin' doofus drug cartel guy. I thought he was an interesting, plot development. Although I do think that I think we're going to get into this very soon. But I thought that the drug cartel was sort of the weakest part of this novel. Mitch's time with them in Mexico was sort of some of it felt a little bit out of place or like a little bit drawn out. But I thought he was a funny character.
Yeah, I agree.
Reminded me of have you seen Narcos?
No.
He reminded me of not of like Pablo Escobar, but like one of the other drug lords that are like they're fucking dumbass on that show and just do stupid shit with like with like, you know, horses and for the kids, and then they shoot up everything. I don't know.
That makes sense. Yeah. That's how you do these things. You build community. You give people in desperate measures, you know, a sense of hope and community, and they'll do whatever you want.
Yeah. But who were your favorite characters?
So I don't know if I really had a favorite because I think they were all well written for the purpose they needed to play. Like, you nailed it about Halabi and Barnett. Even Carlos Esparza, I thought just every character represented who and what they were supposed to perfectly. Yeah, none really stood out as a better character than another. They were all pretty much well-rounded. I mean, I really liked Victoria Schaefer. We don't get much of her, but in terms of likability of a person, she was definitely the best. Like, you wanted to support her work, defending the people of this village and getting them what they needed, wanting to alert the NGOs and the upper echelons of these health organizations about the problem that Yars could become. She wasn't around long, but it definitely stood behind everything she was for. So it's kind of cool to have a character like that.
Yeah, I didn't think she was going to die. Like,
me neither.
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Her death. That was, I think I mentioned that before on the pod, but like, I thought that, because again, and this is also a trope, you mentioned this too, a trope that Vince had done, where he builds up a character, and you learn so much about them, and then boom, they're killed. Yeah. Right.
That's another way that in this book, Kyle was hearkening back to the early days of Vince and really being true to his style while bringing the storyline into a brand new arena.
Right.
Yep, that's another example. How about action, though? Because to me, this book had more action than many of the others. It seemed nonstop. I was loving it. What was your favorite? What stood out to you?
In terms of like my favorite action scene, it has to be either Mitch's like race through the woods, like his test that he has in Mexico, like the badass scene where he has the dogs and throws cocaine on them and gets away, and then he shows up the next day like dressed in one of the drug lord's like henchman's suit, military suit with his gun, just like a badass. I really enjoyed those two scenes, although I didn't really like the rest of the Mexico part, but like it was that or the whole finish of the book. Like I felt like when I was reading, I both read this book and I listened to it on audiobook, and I felt like the first three-fourths of the book was like, wow, we're not that far along, and then the last fourth of the book went by like light speed.
Yep.
And it culminates with the whole race, with Mitch trying to find the truck with these infected people and the race to the border, and then he gets the truck, he kills Halabi's henchman, and then he has to get past the Mexican government because frickin' Barnett screws him on that. Yeah. And like, he has all of his friends. Like that was great. I love those two scenes.
I'm with you. The action was nonstop, but that was definitely the best one. The highway chase scene was one of those, I can't put the book down. I need one more minute to finish this. But I can't get over both the opening cave scene with the crossbow, how well written that was.
Oh, I forgot about that.
And I just can't get over the cage and the lockpick and all the stuff that happens at Carlos's house when he first, goes into Carlos's bedroom, puts on his clothes, sits down and orders breakfast with the maid.
Oh, that was great.
That whole sequence was awesome. But for action, definitely the ending, that race to the border, for sure.
Also, I did enjoy with Scott and his men the trip to the village and them getting ambushed.
Yep. Oh yeah, that's right.
That was a really good scene. And then it ends with like, oh, we don't know where Mitch is, and then boom.
That's right.
He shows up at the cafe like the next day.
I forgot about the Yemen, water. The desert fight scene. That might tie.
That was really good.
That's up there. You're right. I'm thinking so much about the ending of this book because it was so heavy and quick with so much going on. But the first third of the book was also pretty awesome on action back in the Yemeni desert and the cafe. Yes. Forgot about that. And that's when, that's good stuff.
So I have a question for you, Mike. Who do you think is the bigger villain in this novel? Is it Halabi and his methods? Is it the cartel? Or is it the politicians?
Well, I like how you coined the term big bad. Like Halabi is that big bad. And Halabi is the one with the plan that could potentially bring down the world. So while he's the big bad villain, I think Barnett is the true villain in this book.
Yeah, me too.
I think Mills, more than the pandemic, more than the drugs, I think what he wanted to come through was the craziness of our political system, particularly starting with the 2016 election, but by no means is that where all the problems began, but end, right? But I think particularly the way he wrote Barnett so extreme, and how even her political henchman, Gray, her chief of staff, who was supposed to be very cunning and very, Machiavellian, she supersedes him very quickly in how far she's willing to go and how evil she is. So I think that message of what she would do to tear down America, or how she was tearing down America, was the biggest villain. put aside the whole Halabium trying to end the world, kill hundreds of millions or billions of people. Like, besides all that, Barnett truly represented evil the most in this book.
Right. I did have one more question for you, Mike. How did you feel about President Alexander in this novel? It's sort of a minor question, but he really he's riding out the rest of his presidency. He doesn't want to really get involved, although he is willing to give Mitch like the blanket pardon in the end. But he sort of seems like he's very much I don't know, what is the term, a lame duck president?
Yeah, lame duck.
But I love Alexander. Like
exactly.
I've loved him from previous books. That's why I didn't like.
I was torn
how he was acting.
Yeah. And maybe,
but he redeemed himself a little bit with the pardon.
Sure,
bringing Mitch in.
This might bring us into the parts we didn't like about the book, but there is definitely a move and a shift away from Alexander and how the presidency can be this grand, imposing force for good. Mm-hmm. Is kind of moved away from in this book. The force for good is going to be, well, one, Rapp, of course, but it's going to be like Victoria Schaefer, who's on the ground. It's going to be Gary Statham, who's an expert on diseases. We're moving away from a strong Oval Office dictating the pace, dictating the solutions. Yeah, I agree. Alexander came off weaker, and maybe that's a testament to Kyle's writing and understanding of the political system. In an election year, the sitting president loses a lot of capital, a lot of influence.
Right.
They very often their hands are tied by their party because the party no longer sees them as the boss. The party is busy picking their next figurehead that they're going to get behind. And very often, if you have to, usually the vice president, right? But even if you have to kind of lower the standing of the current sitting president, you do that in hopes that your next candidate is going to pick up steam and be able to, say the right things instead of the current president saying the right things. So maybe he's onto something with that, but I still didn't like it was a little disappointing to me how little Oval Office scenes there were, where it's Alexander and Kennedy. I just wanted to see more of that Oval Office, White House kind of stuff. Instead, we got the campaign stuff with Barnett, which I also liked as well. So it was like a catch-22 there.
Yeah. I wanted more Kennedy in this book. I don't know. I don't know. I just felt myself missing Kennedy in this book.
I agree. Is there anything else while we're on it that you thought Lethal Agent fell short of your expectations on?
No, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but yeah, I don't know. While I realized I liked the idea of putting Mitch in this new environment and putting him in Mexico and stuff, but some of the getting to the cartel and like some of the scenes of the cartel just seemed, I don't know, unneeded. Like they could have had him. They needed to get him to the virus, and they needed to get the virus here. So I realized, and that's how he picked cartel. Like that's how we do it. And I think he's mentioned that he had this idea, and he's toyed with this idea previously in his Mark Beeman series, where Mark Beeman is an FBI agent, and in his first novel, The Rising Phoenix, where what if the drug trade is tainted, right? So it's like it's different concept, but he obviously had something floating in his, some of the ideas floating in his mind. Mm-hmm. And I get how he brought that in here. I don't know. I just felt like some of it was just fluff.
Yeah. I could see that, but I did like when the novel pivoted to the drug cartels and we were inside them. And what I felt was fluff was a bit earlier on with the Anthrax production, to be honest with you. I thought the author's note was going to really catch my attention when he said, I deliberately changed things with Anthrax production. And then it seemed to be the side plot that I didn't really end up caring about. Right. And so I thought wanting to stir up hysteria using the Anthrax. And originally, you remember that silly celebrity scene?
Oh, yeah, that was another scene that I was just like...
Rapp takes the side job to protect two like pop stars, I think.
And it reminded me like Justin Bieber.
Bieber, somebody, and his girlfriend. And I was like...
Gigi Hadid, I don't know, something like that.
And I think there was a reason for that. I think it put him in California where they were going to find the drug tunnel. I forget the reason, but I was like, all this because Halabi wants to threaten celebrities with anthrax to create panic? Guess what would create panic? 2 months after you let the Yars people in, say, guess why everybody's been getting sick and dying recently and you can't figure it out? And he goes, this guy. Like, to me,
well, I guess
that would have been more effective.
You had to have Mitch overcome it, so I see why you couldn't do that. But,
sure, I agree too. But to make the whole anthrax distraction and to even distract Bertrand, to make Bertrand look like and dress up like he's producing anthrax and make videos of it, I guess he wants the propaganda to create this hysteria, but too drawn out, and as a side plot, it didn't really get me. The R shit was scaring me out of my wits. The anthrax stuff was like, can we get over with this now?
Yeah.
So, that's just me.
All right, that's what we didn't like about it. What do we like best about this novel? Because this is one of my favorite novels. So I will say, like, while I had some qualms, this is one of my favorite Mitch Rapp novels.
I'm with you. I mean, I want to get to our final ratings because what I liked was every other thing in this book, every other character, every scene, all the action nonstop. What Mitch does, what his team does. I love how we see in the beginning he's with Coleman and the boys. Maz is there, Charlie Wicker's there, and then at the end they're all back again and they're all helping out. We even see Fred Mason, the pilot.
Yes.
He comes in. Yeah, he comes back with a helicopter to take Coleman to track the truck. Everything else that happened in this book, lights out. Absolutely one of my favorites in the whole series.
Yeah. So
yep.
I agree with you. I loved everything about this novel. I loved the plot, even if it was developed before, our current times. I love, we mentioned the character development. I think Kyle is very good at that. I liked bringing us back to a very Flynnian style novel.
Yes.
of original days. And, in the end, we get this scene where we don't know if Mitch is going to die. We're left, like, those final pages, I'm just reading. I'm like, holy shit, is Mitch dead? But wouldn't it have been crazy if he just left us on a rope? Like, if he didn't tell us, if he didn't have the epilogue?
Yeah, I don't know what I would have done. That was crazy, just wondering. Even when Mitch gets infected, fighting with Atia to take over the truck, when Mitch gets infected, he's popping these antibiotics knowing they won't do anything, but he wants to keep his mind in the game. I'm like, crap, could this really be it? Or could this do serious damage? Yeah. I also wondered, at the end, I was left like, does Barnett take the pills? Like, is she out? Or is she so evil she's going to try to come back and she's going to think she can one-up Rapp? Like, her character was so deep, I was even thinking that far ahead. But great ending. Great final scenes. Well done, Kyle. So, final ratings, Chris. What do you give in this book?
I gave it an A, and I gave it a 9.1, which is higher than I give a 9 to Transfer of Power, which is my favorite novel that we've done thus far. So, pretty high in my standards. I really enjoyed this novel. What about you, Mike?
I'm with you. My first reaction was like, 9.5, and then it's got to be a sliding scale because I was like, well, it can't be higher than Transfer of Power for me. So I kind of did the opposite. My first reaction was it might be up there. It might crack the top. It probably cracks the top 5 of my favorite Rapp novels, but I just couldn't find it within me to rate it higher than I did Transfer of Power. So I ended up giving it a 9, somewhere in that A- range. Looking back, I feel like I like Transfer of Power so much I could have gone higher. And if so, I probably would have went higher in this book.
Yeah, we're going to have to, once we do more books, we're going to have to redo our rank,
Got to reevaluate.
I need a regrid.
Yeah, I got to reevaluate, but this was a great one. I think when we're said and done, this might just crack into the top 5, but Transfer Power is still up there for me, and this one came really close. It really did.
Definitely. Yeah, looking forward to reading the next one.
Yes, sir.
I've already read it, but talking about the next one.
I want to talk about it too. Total Power has been eating at me. I'm ready to get it out there come September 15th.
Yes.
But that's a way off. So what are we talking about in our next episode, Chris, next week?
Right. So in our next podcast, I'm very excited to be announcing this right now. We have a very special podcast. We are going to be interviewing the one, the only, Kyle Mills.
Ding, 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 ding. You're getting emotional here, Chris. You're getting emotional.
Our man, David, from Atria Mystery Bus, hooked us up
the bus
with an interview. with Kyle Mills. So yeah, he's doing his press tour for Total Power. Your very own Mitch Rapp Pod is going to be interviewing him, talking about Total Power, a little bit about the series as a whole, asking him some questions.
Can't wait to do that with you, Chris. Because we're so excited about that, our August giveaway is going to be a copy of Kyle's first book ever, Rising Phoenix, signed by the author himself. And we are going to be giving that away to any of our Twitter and Facebook followers. So be sure to follow us on Twitter and retweet that post. Join our No Limits Facebook group, and maybe you can win a copy of Rising Phoenix.
Also, check us out on Instagram.
Hey,
if you're an Instagram follower, just started an Instagram, so we'll be running that special on Instagram as well.
Cool. So like our post on Instagram, join the Facebook group, or retweet our post, and you can be entered into that. We also are giving away Kyle's first ever standalone novel, so not in the Mitch Rapp or Mark Beeman or even Covert One series that he wrote, his first standalone novel, Burn Factor, and that will be our August giveaway for our patrons. So if you want to become a patron this month, please do so. Help us out. We're also getting ready to make our first donation in the next couple of months to the Prostate Cancer Foundation. And we're happy to have you listening in.
Yeah. And please, as always, subscribe, rate, and review us using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at mitchrappod.com or using our Twitter handle at mitchrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.